Hello and welcome to the EDU-TALK author series hosted by Biotone Edu Partner Program, and massage industry authors. The EDU-TALK author series is a bonus extension to EDU-TALK Tuesdays to further support virtual learning and connect you with industry authors who, through their books and textbooks, support your career success. Today's authors are Cherie Sohnen-Moe and Dr. Ben Benjamin. Cherie began her massage career in 1978, later becoming an educator, author, and industry presenter. She's the past president of the Alliance for Massage Therapy Educators and has presented several EDU-TALKs now posted in the EDU-TALK library on biotone.com. Dr. Ben Benjamin began his career in 1963 in sports medicine and muscular therapy. He's founder of the Muscular Therapy Institute and the Benjamin Institute in Massachusetts. He has over 30 years as an educator and consults on legal cases surrounding ethics. Ben is also an author of Listen to Your Pain. So we'll have to have you back another time, Ben, to discuss Listen to Your Pain.
Sure.
But today, Ben and Cherie have co-authored The Ethics of Touch, which is a must-read for students and practicing therapists. Let's listen and learn as they share their inspiration, insights, tools, and tips for your personal safety and career success. Ben and Cherie, thank you for joining us today and look forward to hearing all about Ethics of Touch.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having us. So we'd like to start by talking about how the book originated. In the late 1980s and early 90s, I wrote or co-authored about 8 articles on subjects related to sexual abuse in healthcare, setting boundaries, sexual misconduct, dual relationships, and working with survivors of abuse. And as a result of these articles, in 1994, I was invited to be a panelist at a university conference on sexual abuse prevention in healthcare in Boston, along with the department heads of Harvard Medical School, Boston University Medical School, University of Massachusetts in Amherst Medical School, and Boston College of Nursing. And there I was, the owner and director of the Muscular Therapy Institute, a massage therapy program. I think that the conference was called something like It's Never Okay. And we all discussed what we taught and how many hours of training we offered on subjects related to sexual abuse prevention. The medical and nursing schools had between 5 and 14 hours of training over 4 or 5 years of their schooling, and they included subjects on sexuality, sexual abuse, communication, ethics, and boundaries. Now, the Muscular Therapy Institute, my school, had about 150 hours of training on these same subjects over a 3-year program. It actually blew everybody's mind. And it was at that moment that I realized how far ahead of some of us were in the bodywork field. And at that moment, that's when I actually started to write this book. And I decided I needed to write this book. And for the next 5 years, I worked on the book. And then I felt a little bit stuck. And at about that time, I was asked to teach at an American Massage Therapy Association conference in the mountains of Utah. I think that was in 1999. And in my free time at the conference, I decided to sit in on one of Cherie's workshops. And she talked about, in this workshop, she talked about the importance of collaborating with other therapists, and you don't have to go it alone. So I sat there and was thinking, and then at the end of the workshop, I went up to Cherie, introduced myself, and I said, well, how about the two of us collaborating on something or exploring it? And we met that evening at a table, I remember, in a lounge on the 5th floor, I think it was, and decided to work together on an ethics home study course to see how we liked working together. And we loved it. And then I asked Cherie to join me in authoring the Ethics of Touch, the ethics book. It didn't have a name yet, bringing in her expertise and experience in business ethics, practice management, ethical product sales, as well as her being a publisher. That's how it kind of started. Cherie.
Yep. So here is the latest edition. The third edition just came out earlier this year, and we're pretty excited about it. So people always ask us, well, what's in this book? And to me, one of the important things to think about this book is most massage therapists are alone in their work with their clients. And they have to make decisions that can be very challenging. And some of those decisions have to be made on the spot. This book really provides guidance on so many issues that therapists face. Things like, how can I be an ethical practitioner? How do I, discover or clarify, what's really important to me? What are my values? What are my goals? And then most importantly, how to resolve ethical challenges and dilemmas.
Well, then, how does the book actually help people in their practice was another question we thought we'd ask. Well, the book points out potential issues and real life scenarios so you can think about them ahead of time. For example, let's say you have a client who keeps talking during the session and asking you personal questions that you're not comfortable answering. Or over the next week, you're sexually attracted to not one, but several clients. The book helps guide you as to what do you do and where do you find help for when these issues come up?
Yeah. So we start off, we're going to just kind of run through a little bit about the book and highlight some of the things where we think can really help people. But first of all, the first chapter, we start at the beginning, it's ethical principles. And that's really about helping you develop a strong ethical base. It sets the foundation for the book and all of the subsequent chapters. Ben and I start out, we start out by exploring the therapeutic relationship. What are the important elements? And hands-on practitioners, they're held to a higher standard of client care than people in many other careers. And so through the discussions we have, the scenarios and the activities, we address the unique combination of ethical issues that arise in the therapeutic relationship, which many are not the same that arise in other kinds of business relationships. One of the topics we cover in this chapter is the power differential. And I'm always amazed that when I'm teaching an ethics class, and we get to this point, someone will invariably say, I don't believe in the power differential. And I'm like, well, that's like not believing in gravity. And, the point is to understand how the power differential works and the ways that you can manage it to be an asset. So throughout the book, we look at things like that, and it's not so much what something is or isn't, but how do we manage it? And it's one of my favorite activities in this chapter, though, is the values assessment, because it really helps you identify what's important to you. And then the last part of this chapter provides a systematic approach to how to resolve ethical dilemmas. And trust me, there will always be dilemmas in a practice. It doesn't mean that you're not ethical, but dilemmas do arise. Ben?
So what I think about as the soul of the book is really its boundaries. And it took me actually many years to learn how critically important healthy boundaries are. How we create boundaries, how we maintain them, how we change them as our relationships change. We talk about boundary violations, what they are, and how to respond when someone crosses the line and violates your boundary. So my interest in this began actually in the early 1990s, when a well-known psychiatrist in the Boston area was accused and found guilty of sexually molesting his cancer patients. At the time, I was teaching a workshop that weekend to 34 different students from around the United States. And I asked them, well, how many of you personally know of a sexual assault that happened by a massage therapist, or person was accused of it in a massage therapy session? And 17 out of 34 people raised their hand. And this is not counting all the female therapists in the field that field boundary violations by male clients every single day. Now, this was a wake-up call for me about the seriousness of boundary violations in many professions, including our own. And this set me on a personal mission to create an entire workshop and trainings on boundaries that I could offer. I looked around, and I didn't really see much that was being offered at the time. So boundaries became a central theme of lots of my work, my research, and my teaching. And connected to this, there's a lot of stuff in the book about communication skills. So in addition to your hands-on skills, good communication is one of the most important skills in creating good boundaries and creating a successful private practice. Clients keep coming to see you because they're comfortable being in your presence. A good deal of that has to do with how skillful you are and how authentically you communicate. For me, communication skills are a part of the fabric of ethics and boundaries. Since the founding of my school, which was in 1974, communication skills were always a central part of the training. Most people think they have terrific communication skills. You ask them, well, why did a communication go so poorly? And they usually think it's the other person's fault. Starting with the second edition of the Ethics of Touch, we included a section on something called SAVI, S-A-V-I, which stands for the System for Analyzing Verbal Interaction. This communication methodology gives you a kind of X-ray vision for understanding communication. When a conversation goes badly, most people have no idea what actually happened. It started out great and then it kind of went horrible. This system gives you the tools to figure out exactly why a conversation goes poorly. It also gives you the tools to become a truly good communicator. It does this in three ways. It teaches you awareness. First, how and where your own communication falls down. Second, it teaches you strategies for turning those conversations around. And third, it encourages you to practice, and practice some more to replace any poor communication habits with good ones. As an example, I remember a student who said, I just asked this person a question and they started attacking me. So I asked, well, what was the question? And the student replied, how could you do such a thing? This person was totally unaware that they were actually attacking the other person in the form of a question. What would you say? I would say that the majority of people are not aware of their part in why communication with others fail. And I could go on and on about this for a long time. As a matter of fact, I co-authored a book called Conversation Transformation, but I'm going to stop here, turn it back over to Cherie.
Well, actually, Ben, I think that Donnell, you might want to have Ben come back and do another talk just on communication skills, because I think that would be really wonderful. I just want to do a quick little mention here. One of the chapters is on dual relationships. And this is one of the stickiest areas that therapists get into. And dual relationships, by nature, there's nothing like good or bad about a dual relationship, yet they can lead to serious problems. On the other hand, if they're managed well, they can be neutral and sometimes even helpful to the therapeutic relationship. So in this chapter, we really explore the risks of mixing your business with your personal relationships, why in general, it's not a good idea to make friends with your clients, and also explores how do people slip into inappropriate relationships, because these things happen all the time. And it also provides things to consider before getting into dual relationship, and then some tips on minimizing concerns. The most important thing is, to avoid a dual relationship if it is not going to be beneficial to the therapeutic relationship.
And there's a chapter on sexuality. The chapter is actually called Sex, Touch, and Intimacy, things that people often get confused. Most people don't talk about sexuality. However, when you're in a room with somebody who's mostly unclothed, unexpected things can happen. Your client can become sexually aroused. What do? You become attracted to a client. How do you handle that? Or clients ask inappropriate probing questions. We discuss how you handle all these situations. For many people in our society, sexuality is a taboo subject, and this is really unfortunate. There's a pervasive confusion between touch and intimacy, thinking that a therapist's touch means they can be intimate with you. Sexuality is one of the most beautiful, enjoyable, natural experiences one can have. So many people are starved for loving physical contact and the pleasure that can come from sexual contact. When our sexuality is expressed in healthy relationships, it often gets Now, let me say that again. When our sexuality is not expressed in healthy relationships, it often gets twisted into control, power, and sometimes violence. The incidence, for example, of rape in the United States and around the world is staggering. In the United States alone, there's a rape every 6 minutes. Nationwide, 81% of women and 43% of men have reported experiencing some form of sexual harassment or assault in their lifetime. Cherie.
Yeah. So to help you prepare for that, because your clients, you're going to have clients who have been abused in one way or another. So this chapter really helps you with that. The next chapter is on ethical practice management. One of the, close to my soul here that I love to talk about, because the way you manage your business impacts the way your clients feel about you and your practice. So it goes beyond the hands-on touch. If you don't handle your business practices well, no matter how good your therapy is, it's going to negatively impact your practice. So ethical practice management involves the art and the skill of managing daily working affairs, with others based on honesty, integrity, and forthrightness. So in this chapter, we kind of go through your attitudes, policies, and procedures relating to your conduct with clients. How do you maintain your client records? Working within your appropriate scope of practice. How do you properly dismiss a client? That's a really difficult one. And, it's not something we can just say right now. It takes quite a few pages in our book to really explore how do you do this properly? How do you accurately represent your abilities? And most importantly, how do you honor confidentiality? And that is one of the biggest issues, is people breaking confidentiality. It is a major aspect of professionalism. So while most people are clear about the major aspects of professionalism, it's the subtle situations that can cause problems. And that's what we constantly do throughout this book is, there's a spectrum. Somebody does something that's illegal or unlawful, that's really clear cut. But the majority of stuff happens in between. And that's the areas that people don't think about. They think about, we need to tell them what you don't do. Yes, you do, but that's pretty clear. It's all these other gray areas. And that includes, your business practice also. Practice management includes business, but also having a business that kind of challenges you. It's boundaries and to operate from deeply held values. I personally put my money where my mouth is. I support certain stores and businesses that I support who they are and what they stand for. And I will not shop at certain places that I don't do that. And people do that a lot with their money and time. So you want to make sure that you are running an ethical practice. So as with all ethical issues, managing a business presents many choices, dilemmas, and challenges. So this chapter does a lot of exploring about your own beliefs, the information that affects your ability to maintain and build ethical, professional, dependable business or business relationships, or an employee-employer relationship. And there are definitely some aspects of business where there are right and wrong ways to do things. For example, following legal regulations and paying taxes. Those are pretty clear cut. But the tricky parts are, how do you handle things like tips, gift certificates, product sales? And again, it's not that those things are right or wrong, but there are decisions to make, and there are different ways that you can do it depending on your belief system. The other aspect of that I want to just really quickly touch upon is a chapter that we call the team approach. And there's a lot of practitioners, they don't want to be in practice on their own. So they'll seek employment or join forces with others to create group practices. And these alliances can be so beneficial for the practitioners as well as their clients. Unfortunately, too many people, they'll go into these alliances, or take jobs in company without creating a proper structure to clarify their expectations, to guide their interactions and make sure that they're creating an environment or going into an environment where it can be an ethical environment, and where ethical dilemmas are handled properly. So this chapter explores, again, some of the potential dilemmas in working in group practice or working as an employee. This last edition, we added, Ben added, particularly he added a whole lot more on what to expect from employers. And so when you're going to get a job, these are things that you should look out for. And then finally, there was, one of the things, and actually, Ben, this is another thing that I think would be a great thing for you to do another talk on by yourself. Ben has created this beautiful guidelines for preventing sexual assault. And actually, we have that for free on our website, so you can download that, and this just shows his and our, real commitment to keeping therapists safe and keeping clients safe. So finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the chapter on support systems. As I started before, I think I started when we talked in the beginning about, most practitioners are alone in their practice. They work alone. So it's really important to get support and being a skilled therapist for dealing with clients, as well as to deal with the challenges that just occur in your practice. And I think that, practitioners need a shame-free, trusting relationship with peers, with mentors or supervisors, to sort out their dilemmas and help build communication skills. So this chapter kind of explores a variety of support systems. What are the essential elements to have in those systems? And then some tips for how to find or create support systems for yourself. So Ben, do you want to next talk about the last chapter?
Sure. So last chapter is about working with trauma survivors. And there are millions of people who are survivors of trauma of all sorts. And there are many types of trauma: sexual trauma from incest or rape, physical and emotional trauma from domestic violence, which is rampant in the United States and around the world, the trauma of war, which many people never recover from, and the emotional traumas that occur in children every day. These things happen in the nicest looking houses. You would never know, but now we do know, and the statistics are astounding. All of these individuals suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The survivors of trauma lay on our tables every single day, even if we're not aware of it. And sometimes they're not aware of it. How you approach them, so that they feel safe, takes a different set of skills that are outlined in our book. Massage therapy has been very useful for many thousands of people who have suffered from trauma of all sorts. However, the therapist who is not educated in how to work with survivors of trauma can do a lot of damage. In our book, we teach many of the basics that every therapist should know. You have to treat everyone with pristine boundaries. Good boundaries create safety for everyone, but especially for those who suffered from trauma, even though they may not be aware of it themselves. A few years ago, I had a client who was a lovely, sweet person. If you knew the terrible sexual, intellectual, and physical trauma that she had experienced, you would wonder how she's even a functional adult. You would never know it by looking at her and by talking with her. She got the help that she needed, both physically and emotionally, and she recovered. So these are the things we'd like to have people have information about, and our book contains a wealth of information about all these things. So Cherie, would you like to say something as we close?
Yeah, so here we have it again, The Ethics of Touch. You can purchase this book on our website, Sohnen-Moe.com. And I just really encourage you to read this book, do the activities, do that self-exploration that the book requires, and then keep this for you to use throughout your life, because this book, the tools that are in here are good not just for your professional life, but they will help you in your personal life too.
I have been fascinated listening to you both, because it sounds like it's just practical knowledge for everyday life as well. From communication to just understanding our own personal boundaries. So as professionals in the massage industry, I mean, this should just be everywhere and referenced, you know, back and forth. You don't read it once. It is a workbook for them and career success. So I really thank you for sharing the inspiration of the books, the tools and tips, that this book keeps growing and adds value, you know, to personal lives, clients' lives, practices. And I'd like to mention that Cherie did an EDU-TALK last year, I believe, or earlier this year, on ethical practice management. And that can be found in the EDU-TALK library on biotone.com. Again, I had another question to go back to. On the website, and I'd like you to clarify the website for the booklet, is it Prevent Sexual Assault or Preventing Sexual Assault? What's the actual title of it, and which website is that found on?
Okay, I'm just going to go to my website right here so I can tell you exactly what it is. It is called
Guidelines, I think it says first.
Sexual Assault Prevention Guidelines, and it's under
Okay.
the free resources.
That's great for people to know, and that's on Sohnen-Moe.com?
Yes.
Okay, want to be sure we're directing people in the right area. So thank you so much for your time. This has been so valuable for listeners. And with that, I will say goodbye and thank you.
Bye-bye.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Donnell.